Hey everyone, hope you're all having a great day today. I want to talk about a video that I saw recently this morning actually, and I don't know if you've seen it. It's basically a video about someone talking about why they believe that phones are demonic. Now, I don't know who this person is. I don't know if it's viral. I don't know if it's trending or whatnot. I just saw this video and I kind of had one of those moments where I was like, I see the point that you're trying to make, but I also feel like there are certain things that also need to be talked about here. And I want to talk about some of those points today because I don't want people in fear over this. I don't want people, throwing away their phones because they're afraid that, it's a, gateway to Satan or something. So, one of the things that I want to first make clear is that what the enemy intends for bad, God can use for good. And likewise, what God makes good, anything in excess, first off, is not good. So, do I believe that there's a problem with all of us being on our phones too much, myself included? Yes. I've told you guys many a time where I try not to be on my phone too much because, yes, it is true. I do believe that in today's day and age, a lot of us are attached to our phones like crazy, and that's not very good. However, I do believe to say that therefore all phones are evil and that we can't use our phones for good, I think is an overstatement and I think is um, a bit of a generalization that I think needs to be addressed. So, first off, one of the things that was mentioned was kind of this idea of influencer culture and how by seeing all these influencers, and trying to be like them, that's not necessarily good because it's increasing your, self comparison. Some of these people might not be following Christ, and so you're, comparing yourself to someone who's not even following Christ, and that can be a bad thing, and that is definitely true. I do believe that, but that is more of an idolatry problem rather than a problem with the phone itself. Now, phones can definitely make that harder with social media. Social media is something that I don't have. I don't really have any social media. This is pretty much the bulk of what I have. YouTube, and I only use YouTube for doing stuff like this. Um, so I wanted to first make that point. Do I believe that social media is unhealthy? I do. I believe that, it, like the person said, it can increase those feelings of isolation when you're seeing, people's lives and people just seeming to be living these amazing lives. But I've even said this, I think, in a video like years and years ago, that we're really only seeing the highlights of someone's life. And so we can't constantly be looking to people in social media and being like, oh my gosh, I want to be like them, because again, we're only seeing the highlights. We don't see the negatives that come from, certain aspects of their lives. We don't see, the negatives. Really, that's really what it is. We're really only seeing what people want us to see. So in that regard, yes, I do believe that in some cases social media can be a very bad thing, especially when it comes to self-comparison. I believe it can, lead to decreased self-esteem, depression, feelings of isolation, etc. And so, in that regard, yes, I do believe that social media can be a very negative thing. And again, like I said before, that's why I think it is good to try and take time away from our phones because of that. Again, do I believe that phones are just inherently bad for that reason? No. One thing I do want to say, sorry, I have notes. I haven't taken notes for a video in so long, but I had to for this one. So like I said before, yes, I do agree that the way in which we are attached to our phones isn't great. Like I said, I do try to spend less time on there myself. But the issue isn't necessarily the phone itself, it is the way in which we're using it. So I think that that's something, like I said before, that needs to be addressed. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and that they were really emphasizing, this is a big one, so I hope you're still watching, is that when it comes to evangelizing and connecting with people, that our phones are um, a fake example of that. That it's almost like invalid if it's on the phone. This is a yes but no situation. I personally believe that in person fellowship is the best kind. I believe that in person fellowship is ideal, and that is what we should be desiring. In person fellowship, in person connection, in person evangelism. Yes, I agree. However, we live in times where speaking to people around the world can be used for a good thing. Being able to evangelize around the world, that's a gift. Not all of us have paychecks that we can just travel extensively sharing the gospel with anybody and everybody in every country. That's just not reality for a lot of us. Not everyone makes that kind of a paycheck. And additionally, during COVID, we've seen the benefits of having technology where we weren't allowed to leave at all. I started this channel during COVID. We couldn't leave our houses, and I was feeling super isolated. I made this channel because I had a lot that I wanted to say about God, a lot that I wanted to share about God, not just God, but also, my experience, in, being a same-sex attracted Christian and finding, salvation in Christ alone, and also, just sharing the good news of the gospel. That was really actually the biggest reason why I wanted to, this, believe it or not, the same-sex attracted thing wasn't even the main focus originally. It was just the gospel. Now that a lot of people on this channel are Christians who struggle with same-sex attraction, now I do make a lot of videos about that. But again, it's because people in that boat oftentimes don't have that in-person fellowship. And so when we don't have that in-person fellowship, we turn to the internet. And additionally, not everyone lives in areas where they have free grace gospel preaching churches. I didn't for a very long time. Not only during COVID, we couldn't leave the house and we couldn't, go to church, but not everyone lives in an area where they can go to a free grace gospel preaching church. Not everyone has that convenience. When I was living at home, I didn't have a church that I went to. Now that I've moved, I am lucky enough where I do have a church that I attend in person that is free grace, that preaches the truth of the gospel, that it's Jesus' finished work on the cross alone that saves us. But that's not something that everyone has. When I was home, I didn't have that kind of a church. And I looked for an in-person church that preached the true gospel of Jesus Christ and Him crucified. That wasn't that common where I lived, and I know a lot of other people are in that same boat too. So what are we supposed to do? Just not have fellowship? Travel 5 hours every Sunday to find it? Like, that's just not reality for a lot of people, unfortunately. And so for those of us who aren't able to have in-person fellowship, what else do we have? So this has been a blessing. This online ministry has been huge. Yes, I do film videos from my computer now. If we want to be specific and technical, no, I don't film them on my phone anymore, but I did for the first 4 years of this channel. The first 4 years that I did YouTube, my phone was what I was recording these videos on, okay? So, I'm pretty sure you guys remember. There were times where I've even had videos where my phone literally dropped in the middle of it and you could see it literally fall. So, that's what I used. So, I don't believe that phones in and of themselves are bad inherently. Do I believe they can be used for bad? Absolutely. But I also believe that they can be used for good. And additionally, even further with the whole idea of being connected and the assumption that it's a false connection, I have found so much blessing from being able to, and I know that I'm not alone in saying this, so I just want to say this is not just I've been able to do that. Many people I know who are on here on other channels. We've all been immensely blessed by the fellowship that we've been able to find virtually. The fact that I've been able, they made the comment about, speaking to other people in other countries, and it almost made it sound like that's a negative. I found that to be an insanely positive thing. Being able to talk about Jesus with people from, South America, Latin America, Africa, Europe, South Asia, it's insane. I feel like at least I would say at least 4 or 5 out of the 7 continents, I've been able to have a conversation with somebody about Jesus through this channel. That's insane. And that's amazing. That should be, I don't see how that's a bad thing. I told you guys, I don't have the paycheck to be traveling extensively to all these different countries and continents telling people about the gospel. Do I try to talk to people about the gospel in person? Abso-heckin-lutely. I do not believe that we should be neglecting that. I think it's very important that we have a presence out in the world, with the people that are in our lives. But I also think it's important to not neglect the gift that we have to talk to people around the world, I don't think it's lazy to... It almost sounded like the point they're trying to make is that, oh, now we can just sit up on... We don't have to go out into the world. We can just sit and make a YouTube video. If you're someone who is neglecting talking about Christ in the real world because of the convenience of the internet, that's one thing, but I also don't think that's the majority of people here. What about people who are disabled, who can't leave their house? What about people, again, who don't make a paycheck where they can go and travel all the time? You know, this is what we have, and so we're going to use it. I say it's using your resources. Maybe that's just me, but I don't know. That's my opinion on that. I found virtual fellowship to be a blessing because, again, we don't always have the in-person. Again, like I said before, I will say this, I find in-person fellowship to be the best kind. I believe that that is what we should be striving for. I believe that in-person fellowship is ideal. I believe that that is the thing that we should all be looking for. Okay, I agree. However, not everyone has the privilege of having people that they can talk to in person. You know what I mean? And so, when you don't have that, sometimes it's temporary. I told you guys, like, I was in a position for 4 years. When I first graduated, I was living at home for almost 5 years, and I didn't have in-person fellowship, and that was very difficult for me. But I looked for it in person, couldn't find it. So what did I do? I turned to the internet, and that was what was helping me get through that time. Okay, I can 110% say that I have made friends on here through YouTube, and I have, been able to have fellowship with you guys, and I would call that authentic just because we're not in person. Again, would it be great if we were all in person? Absolutely. I prefer that. I think we'd all prefer being with each other in person, but that's not reality right now. And that might not be where we're at right now. Now, like I've said before, now that I've moved, I try to make sure that I get my in-person fellowship time because that's what I find to be the most, refreshing, and I think most of us would agree. But that doesn't mean that everyone's in that same position. Again, when I didn't have that in-person fellowship, internet and virtual was all I had. And thank God I did, because if I didn't, I would be in a much rougher place. So I think it's just kind of one of those things where it's like just having some perspective on the situation. That's kind of the situation right now. So I think that, sorry, I'm just taking a look at my notes. Like I said before, yes, do I believe phones can be used for bad? Yes, I do believe they can, unfortunately. And I do believe that it's important that we don't let our phones consume us. I think it's important to be mindful of how much time we're spending on our phones and what we are putting into ourselves. I do believe, like, trust me, I'm not here to say, phones are great, they're not bad at all. I do believe that there are some negative habits that we have picked up, unfortunately, as a result of our phones. But do I believe that phones are inherently bad because of that? No. I believe that they can be used for good. I believe that they can be used to witness to people, to connect with other believers. It's a good thing. So that's just my opinion. I think the most important things to kind of gather from this is be responsible. We're adults. I think we should be responsible with how much time we're spending on our phones. Be mindful, be aware of how much time we're spending on our phones, and be prayerful. Just if we feel like we're spending too much time on our phones, talk to God about it. Spend some time where you're, digitally detoxing. I'm going to be honest, like, I sometimes need to, like, set timers for myself and be like, okay, I'm going to set a timer, and for this hour of time, I'm not going to look at my phone, I'm not going to look at my computer, I'm just going to focus on XYZ. And that's what I need to do. That's just for me personally. I'm not saying that you have to do it like that, but that's something I found to be beneficial. I'll set a timer sometimes, and I'll just be like, okay, I just need this amount of time. I'm going to put my phone and my computer away, lock them away for a little bit, and then I'm just going to focus on what's right in front of me, or just focus on the tasks that I need to do, or even just simply to take some time to be like, okay, don't look at your phone for this amount of time. Read a book, do something else, be productive, or even just rest, you know what I mean? So I think it's the way in which we're using them that can be bad. And again, that's just something that we need to then learn and address. That's all. I think the big three things is just be responsible, be mindful, and be prayerful. So I hope that this helps a little bit. I just don't want anyone in fear over this, or throwing away your phone. If you're someone who feels like it is to a point where, you really are, like, where it's a problem, there are flip phones, that is an option. I'm not saying don't buy a flip phone. If you're someone who feels like you need a flip phone because you can't, you're too attached to a smartphone, that's just fine. Do whatever works best for you in this situation. I think this is a situation where it's not maybe as black and white as people might be making it seem. That's just my opinion. Am I saying I'm right? Not necessarily. I just feel like to say that phones are inherently bad as a whole, I just don't really see that, and I don't think that that is too far-fetched to say. Same thing with like, I think the reason why I made a video, like why I felt the need to make a video about this, is because of the whole, I think the whole dig at virtual fellowship. Like, I just, again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I believe, yes, we should all be striving for in person fellowship, as I believe that is the most ideal and that's where the really deep connections are made. But again, we're all at different places here in the world and in our lives where sometimes we need that virtual fellowship because that might be all we have. So anyway, I hope this video helps whoever needed to hear this. As always, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, do not ever hesitate to leave me a comment down below, or you can shoot me an email at my email address, which is just christianconvos@gmail.com. Also, if you guys have any prayer requests, let me know of those as well. And as always, have a lovely rest of your day, and God bless.